Hello and welcome to the latest EnvCast episode. EnvCast is a Society for the Environment podcast, bringing you environmental professionals in conversation each month. Each episode is designed to provide insight into the life of registered environmental professionals, featuring experts from across a wide range of sectors and disciplines. We explore what they do, why they do it, how they got to where they are now, and their future ambitions. Each guest has verified their environmental credentials by achieving Chartered Environmentalist, Registered Environmental Practitioner, or Registered Environmental Technician registration. To learn more about the Society for the Environment or our environmental registrations, please visit socenv.org.uk. That's socenv.org.uk. Enjoy the episode. Hello, I'm Phil from the Society for the Environment and welcome to this month's EnvCast episode. Today I'm joined by a senior lecturer in sustainable futures based at the University of Exeter Business School, who goes by the name of Ed Glücksman. Ed gained his Chartered Environmentalist registration via his full membership of the Institute of Environmental Management and Assessment, and many of you will know them as IEMA for short. His CEnv registration was confirmed just 3 years ago. He is also a chartered scientist via the Institution of Environmental Sciences and has the odd high-level qualification from the University of Oxford, no less, I believe. So let's say hi to our guest today. Thank you for joining us on EnvCast, Ed.
Hi, Phil, and my pleasure to be here today.
It's very nice to have you. Thanks for joining us. And now, as always, on EnvCast, to start proceedings, I'm going to hand over to our guest to give us a flavour of what they currently do in their job. So if it's okay with you, Ed, I'm going to hand straight over.
Perfect. Thank you. So I'm a senior lecturer at the University of Exeter Business School, and I'm based out in Cornwall on our Penryn campus. For those of you who don't know, the University of Exeter has relocated and created departments, bits of a faculty, teaching spaces, and so forth out in Penryn in Cornwall, next to Falmouth. And a lot of the work we do out here is sustainability facing. And that's true of the sub-department of the business school in which I sit, which is called Sustainable Futures. It's within our broader business department of management, but most of what we do in Penryn, in Sustainable Futures, is around the relationship between business and the environment. And that's in terms of our teaching, but also our research and our broader impact in the community. So I can tell you a little bit more about what I do day to day. Should I do that right now, Phil, or do you have specific questions on that?
I know specific questions, so feel free. Go for it.
So day to day, I on the one hand, teach the odd undergraduate module. We run a lot of our modules around the topic of employability, jobs, what to do after university, and making sure that our students understand the link between business and the environment. How can businesses contribute to a prosperous, greener future, but at the same time survive, grow, and develop new products and services. At the same time, I run one of our larger executive education programs, which is with a global consultancy called Capgemini. And I also I'm academic lead on an innovative digital module that we run across the whole university called Future 17, where our students get together with students from a network of universities based all around the world to solve sustainability challenges that are issued by businesses and other organizations that sit all around the world. And that's a credit-bearing module, part of our students' degrees, but completely different from all the other modules that they take.
Okay. There's quite a few elements in there, I think.
Yes.
And you're currently, in terms of your undergraduate teaching or lecturing, you're outside of term time at the moment. As time of recording, we're just mid-September.
Just ramping up to a new term. We're like many universities and many departments dealing with the fallout of what has been a slightly different summer in terms of recruitment to university. Some faculty, some departments have seen numbers go upwards. Some have seen numbers drop slightly as a result of A-level scores post-COVID. But in our case, at the business school in Penryn, actually, those numbers are up very much so. So we are dealing with making sure that our students have the same high quality experience they usually have, but at slightly larger numbers.
Okay. I've got so many questions already. You mentioned student number fluctuation based on A-level results and things like that. Given the topic that you cover, sustainability, do you think that topic is drawing in more students anyway?
Absolutely. And I think that the combination of a traditional business school education with the sustainability slant, I think is very, very popular these days. We have recently restructured the whole university, creating 3 faculties around environment, health, and justice. So greener, healthier, fairer. And the business school has been placed exclusively within our faculty of environment, as it's called, environment, society, and the economy. And within that, the business school is very active on the sustainability front, so much so that we were recognized with the Times Higher Education Business School of the Year Award in December for our work in climate and sustainability. So to answer your question, absolutely. And I think that link between business school and sustainability is increasingly drawing students in.
Okay, good to know. And thank you for mentioning the award as well. I know that in many podcasts that I listen to, like the guests are generally on there to plug something. Now, this isn't the case for our podcast, but the fact that you've mentioned that you've won an award very recently, a very, very commendable award. So congratulations on that one.
Thanks. I mean, that's not me, that's the whole business school. But yes, it is a sign of the times that a business school wins that award as a result of its dedication to climate and sustainability. That's not something that would have happened too long ago.
And we'll probably come back to a lot about the sustainability work and things like that in a moment. But I wanted to draw back on one of the things we mentioned about it being term time or not being term time currently. I believe you run executive and professional education as well as undergraduate and so on. So I assume that keeps you busy during the summer?
Absolutely. So the programs I run, because they are with private sector clients, but also international university partners, the work doesn't quite ever end. I have to say that even with my colleagues who teach exclusively on undergraduate modules, the window where there is a bit of a break in August is becoming shorter and shorter. However, for me, it really does run through the year, but it runs in waves as those programs escalate. But then between programs, it is a bit lighter. So I do get my rest, but I don't get it in traditional term time style rest. Especially the corporate clients, of course, want it in the waves that they've asked for. But working with universities in the Southern Hemisphere, for example, for the Future 17 program that I mentioned, there we really are working almost in the opposite type of calendar. And so there are some very strange times from a European perspective in terms of meetings, in terms of when terms start and so forth. Okay.
So there's a global presence. That sounds very interesting.
Huge global presence.
And I assume the world of digital technology plays into that.
Absolutely. That's becoming increasingly part of our day-to-day role. Again, not just because of my role, but of all my colleagues here. In terms of the Future 17 program, everything is done remotely. Everything is done digitally using tools like Zoom or Teams, using Google as well, Google Meet. But we work with universities and students from universities from 5 different continents for that program. And this is just one undergraduate or postgraduate module, 5 different continents. There will be 10 university partners by the end of this year. And we have to make sure that our students can understand how to work with other students and businesses across all the world's time zones. And I would say one of the biggest challenges of that module is that they have to learn how to do that and learn to accommodate those times, those circumstances, and how to get around that.
Well, I think that sounds fantastic. When I was at university, we had nothing like that. I mean, I don't feel like I'm that old, but when I hear about what's happening at universities these days, I am envious, it's fair to say. Now, when you say 10 university partners, I assume they're different universities in the 5 different continents, I guess. Is that right, that you're working with?
Yeah, that's correct. So Future 17, the 4 founding members are Sao Paulo in Brazil, Stellenbosch in South Africa, Chinese University of Hong Kong, and Exeter as the lead academic partner. And then we work with QS, Quacquarelli Symonds, known for its university rankings, for example, and they are, again, a co-lead delivery partner of the program. And then since then, over the past 2 years, we've brought on board other universities, including University of Auckland in New Zealand, Cairo, Luis in Rome, and we're bringing on more partners as we speak, actually.
Okay, and I don't know if this is going to backfire as a silly question, but what does the 17 mean?
17 are the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals.
Okay.
Because all the challenges, as I mentioned at the start, are sustainability related and actually aligned with one or several of the SDGs.
Okay. I'm going to put that down as a mildly silly question, but
no,
I didn't quite see the link straight away.
Absolutely fine.
What is there a normal day in your role? What does that look like?
As I mentioned, my role does go in waves. And so I would say the normal day, there isn't one across the year, but there certainly is one across a week, for example. So currently, I'm very much preparing for the new Future 17 cohort coming in, recruiting students from an Exeter perspective, speaking to current and future new partners about joining, speaking to QS about how the program is run. So a lot of meetings, a lot online, and a lot with global partners. At the same time, the executive education is ramping up too. So I'm speaking to Capgemini. We have our first face-to-face part of that course in London in 2 weeks. And I can tell you a little bit about that offering later on. But my typical day is a mixture of quite a few meetings online, a few in person here on our Penryn campus. I spend some time on our campus in Exeter, of course, as well. It is a lot bigger than our campus here in Penryn, so I have a lot of colleagues and we have a lot of students there. And then, of course, I spend some of my day working on my computer, putting together course handbooks, materials for both for learning, but also for marketing of our various programs, as well as business development on the executive education front.
Okay. How do you find the split, the differences between your undergraduate lecturing work and your work with the executive and professional education? What's the dynamic there? Well,
I really enjoy it because I love working with our undergraduates. I love teaching some of the materials that I've learned, that I know, and based on my experience. However, I also love building bridges for the university, driving partnerships and creating new programs, both in the executive space, but also ones that allow our students to build partnerships themselves. I think that's becoming a really important added value of a university at the moment. And that's what leads to employability added value as well, and new skills. So I think that the split works really well for me. But I have to say I'm very lucky in that sense. The University of Exeter has 2 general pathways through which or via which you can build an academic career. You have a research pathway, and then you have what's called a scholarship pathway. And the research pathway, which is not what I am, is the way where you are essentially where you are pushed to do more research, publish papers, bring in funding for projects, win grants and that kind of thing. And then the scholarship pathway, which I am, part of is around teaching, developing new educational programs, building partnerships, and so forth. So because we have those two job families, both academic but different families, I am able to work in this space. I am able also to progress in terms of my career in this space without being judged at all on my research output and grant funding wins.
Okay. Now, I'm pleased we've looked into that one, because I think those who are listening to this and were thinking about a career in academia or whatever it might be, might not be aware of those different routes and what they entail. By the sounds of it, your partnership working is pretty key to what you do.
Absolutely. And again, I think more and more universities in the UK are introducing these families into the academic sphere. I think it's really important. If you want people to work in a particular space, you have to formalize what progression looks like if they do it.
Yeah.
So if my colleagues who are in the research side, whenever they spend time doing some of the things I do, they're actually not technically rewarded for it in terms of career progression. And I think that is a really important point to think about when you're thinking about your career and what you want to do. But I certainly didn't know about this before I got into the academic space. The final thing I'd like to say on this is that the University of Exeter has a very large team called Innovation, Impact, and Business. And this IIB team, which is about 140 people, sits between academics and external partners and works across all our campuses and sites. I used to work in that team. It's a non-academic team. They're part of professional services, but having spent 4 and a bit years in that team, I understand the partnership space a lot better than some of my academic peers that work exclusively in research. So that was a really valuable part, I think, in terms of learning the skills needed in this space.
Okay. Sticking with the broad nature of your role for just a few more moments, do you get involved at all in the sustainability work of the university, as in the actual university, the campus, and carbon emissions and things like that?
I have done in the past. We have a large team dedicated to that, and we as a university declared a climate emergency in 2020, and from there came a white paper and came a number of actions that team and the climate change white paper committee have worked on. I've been part of some of those discussions, but not heavily, although I have academic colleagues that are very much leading them, as well as professional services that support them. So I haven't led on any of those initiatives. We did have quite a lot of work done on this in the lead up to the G7 that was in Cornwall back in 2021. That year was a really big one for us. We had the G7 on our doorstep, and we put together a Green Futures campaign, as it was called at the time, showcasing the work we do internally and externally in sustainability. And at the same time, we had COP 26 in Glasgow that year, where we took those materials further and actually ended up being the largest university presence of all global universities at the COP. So again, that's based on our internal work as well.
Okay. Excellent work, University of Exeter. Very nice, very nice. So those who are thinking about a career as a lecturer at a university, it's fair to say there's a bit of variety involved, which is probably for a lot of people good to hear, I'd have thought. Keeps people interested. So thank you for giving us an idea of what that looks like. I wanted to focus in on the undergraduate work that you do in terms of your Sustainable Futures lecturing role, I guess. Now, sustainability futures or sustainable futures, that caught my attention as quite a broad topic. It's probably fair to say. Do you focus in on particular aspects of that? Do you focus it on the sustainability goals, or is the far-reaching theme part of its charm? How does that work?
It is a far-reaching theme, absolutely, and that is the name of our sub-department as well. But to be clearer about it, my teaching is all about really how organizations, including businesses, but also other organizations, are able to be more sustainable. And from our students' perspective, how they can go into jobs where they can help business and organizations become more sustainable. That includes those that are conventional business school students that want to go into making a lot of money, but how that might be possible whilst also contributing to the environment. Being more technical, it also, of course, includes discussions around accreditations, including things like B Corporation status and that sort of thing, and thinking critically about what that means and why it's useful. And also being down here in Cornwall and having worked with hundreds of our local SMEs, thinking about what it means to be doing good, quote unquote, for the world as a business, large and small. And we work with man and woman and their van, just as we work with JP Morgan and Capgemini and so forth. And being able to connect our students to concepts that are applicable to all is the challenge for me and my colleagues, I might add. So, for example, I run a field trip module, which runs every spring, and we go up to Scotland. And the theme there is, on the one hand, very broad around sustainable business, but we spend most of our time in Dundee, a post-industrial city, which has built itself up again, resurrected itself as a green hub, looking at green mobility, looking at circular economy, looking at their education system and the many universities in Dundee and what they teach. But they also have a number of flagship projects that are so interesting to our students and to us from a research perspective. They're just getting an Eden project like we have in Cornwall. Dundee Eden's coming up. They have a V&A museum around design, often around sustainability as well. They had a plastics exhibition last year, for example. The University of St Andrews has what they call their Eden campus now, which is essentially a business incubator. And all of it, again, is packaged around sustainability. And so there's that regional development piece that we discuss here in Cornwall that we then compare and contrast with the Dundee region on our field trip. So that's an example of some of the work we do.
Okay, an eye-opening example for me. I didn't know that Dundee was a green hub, but I'm going to look into that a bit more. I did forget about the Eden project thing, because am I right saying there's 2 Eden projects in the making?
Yes, there are. There's one in Northern England, yes. And there's the one in Dundee, which has just reached another one of its milestones. A few weeks ago, it was in the news for that. So it's not built yet, but it's coming.
Okay. The Eden project are expanding, it's fair to say.
Absolutely.
So, what kind of jobs, I think you referred to a few of them, Red, but what kind of jobs are your students going into? And it's going to be quite broad, I imagine.
It's very broad, and I would say potentially broader even than the Exeter Business School students on Exeter campus, because they come down here with a slightly broader environment slant to their work. But we've actually seen some really interesting graduates of late. We had a couple go into auto racing from the last cohort, including somebody that ended up in Formula One, Red Bull Formula One's marketing team. We've had people go into marketing teams more generally in larger companies, Adobe and that sort of thing. And we've had people gain placements with some of the larger banks, JP Morgan's, HSBC, and so forth. We also have students who don't quite know what they want to do at the end of their degree, as it happens, and they end up taking on maybe a short-term placement or looking for master's courses as well that help them to narrow down their options. But I would say the main driving force that for our graduates, at least on the Penryn campus from our business school, is is around linking sustainability to business. And we've had quite a few what we consider success stories where students from out of county, outside Cornwall, come down here for their degree and actually end up staying in Cornwall and getting a job here working. We have one working for a local construction company as the sustainability manager. We have others that work in their favorite space around surfing. We had one of our graduates has actually recently become the head of sustainability for Spaceport Cornwall in Newquay. So that happens too, and we're particularly proud of that because this campus has a large regional role as well.
Excellent work. I was going to ask you about surfing at the very start. Have you lived in Cornwall for very long? You've been there?
I've been here 9 years, and I am going to disappoint you by telling you that I am not a surfer.
Okay.
But many of my friends and colleagues are, and it does take up some of our free time, and there is a bit of a more relaxed vibe on this campus than when you're on Exeter campus.
I can imagine so. I go to Cornwall 3-4 times a year, and one of my big draws is the surf. So,
okay,
something I had to ask about. I think. Now I'm going to focus on your career, if that's okay.
Sure.
So, for a start, why did you go into lecturing?
I went into lecturing, having spent 4 years in that impact team at the university, and I went into lecturing because this particular role through that scholarship pathway I was telling you about was a continuation of that partnership building and impact work, but from the academic perspective. I really wanted to continue that, and there aren't that many roles that allow me to do that in the academic space. So I would say it's never been a dream for me to be a lecturer, but what has been a dream for me is to be able to bring together my passion for partnership building and impact with environment and try to spread the word. So that is why I went into the lectureship or applied for the lectureship position. The opportunities are huge if you are an academic working in this space. So that's what swung it over for me.
Okay, good to hear. What kind of qualifications and areas of experience did you need to be successful at becoming a lecturer?
Well, I think having worked in the university for, I guess, close to 7 years at that point meant I knew my way around and I knew how the university works. And more than ever now, a university's pushing forward with an aligned strategy is really important. In particular when we're doing externally facing work. So that really helped. What also helped for me is I spent 3 years working in the private sector for a consultancy called Wardell Armstrong. And I was doing environmental and social impact assessment primarily for large mining projects all over the world. And that was really important for me in terms of learning about the company and client relationship, learning about developing contracts and work, and learning about how the private sector operates and what the opportunities might be. It was, quote unquote, only 3 years, but I learned a huge amount in that time, and that actually was where I was able to get those certifications, the Chartered Environmentalist and Chartered Scientist certifications as well, and really understand how to make the most of those too.
So you achieved those whilst working in consultancies?
For the most part. I think I finished the IEMA one when I was back at the university doing the impact work, but that impact team very much functions like a consultancy. And so just understanding the world of consultancy started in the private sector for me and continued now. And I think even the executive education that we deliver through Exeter and that I do is very much like consultancy services in terms of negotiating contracts, delivering to deadlines, all of those factors that you think about as a private sector consultant.
And I think that industry experience, from my experience at university as a student, the lecturers who had industry experience, no matter how much that was, saw things differently. And I think that's incredibly valuable for a student to be able to learn from those kind of experience. I certainly found that anyway. So I could certainly see why that might have helped you, for a start, get the job and be so successful within it. So it makes a lot of sense to me. What are the main challenges you come across in your current role?
I think an interesting one from a personal perspective is working in a business school where I would have said 5 years ago that I would never end up in a business school. My PhD was actually in biology, and then I worked for a number of years in science, communications, policy, and so forth. So entering a business school environment with a very little business school background and being lucky enough to work in this slightly odd space of sustainable futures, I come across a lot of more traditional business school students who sit down with us on day one and say, I'm 18, but I would like to retire by the age of 30, earning millions, and retire, get a boat, and basically turn my life off. And the challenge there is really communicating to them what their options might be. On the one hand, you don't want to stifle their dreams, but on the other, they're 18 and they don't know really what the alternatives are sometimes. And so that I find to be always a challenge. But what is heartwarming there is, of course, during their 3 or 4 year degree, watching their change and watching them learn and watching them understand the complexities of the statement that they make in their first week about their careers is a way something that drives and motivates me as an educator to at least give them the bigger picture before they make such choices in terms of what they want to do next. Again, the contrast between what we offer in Cornwall compared to in Exeter, we are the same business school, but we have that slightly, because the classes are smaller, we're able to engage more personally with our students and walk them through their career plans more often and more carefully. So we also make them do a placement in the third sector in their first year. And that is an absolute eye-opener for them, especially with that mindset. So that, for me, would be one of the challenges, definitely.
Okay, interesting. And what's your favorite part of the job?
I love the people that I meet, the links that I can make, the connections across the different programs. And I find there's always a conversation point with everyone I speak to about some of the other work that we do. So I love when little things grow out as a side story to some of the main programs. For example, with Future 17, sitting in a room with all these other universities and businesses around the world, that actually leads to additional partnerships, whether that's research with colleagues or other impact pieces. Same with our executive education. The Capgemini program has led to additional educational opportunities with Capgemini, maybe even a future site visit this year to their offices and so forth. So I love making those connections and growing the seed of these early programs.
I think you're inspiring me to go back to university and experience these kind of things. Sounds great. I think on your last but one answer, and your last answer just then, answers this question fairly easily, I think. Do you feel like you make a difference?
I think we, as a group here, try our best to make a difference. I can see myself making a difference when, on the one hand, in executive education, if you train hundreds of people in Capgemini, for example, to go out to their clients with a better understanding of climate science and sustainability and how to use it day to day, that is absolutely making a difference. And we have heard the stories already of how that program is impacting the way they work with their clients and their clients down the line. In terms of our students, I see the difference over the 3 or 4 years that they're with us. But then I also have the pleasure of hearing from our students after they graduate, the jobs they pick up, the knowledge that they use. And, I love hearing that feedback. It's not the case with every student.
No.
but I do feel I make a difference on that front, and those are the moments that make it worthwhile.
Whereas maybe you might hear a bit more feedback than most would do, maybe in the main university in Exeter, given that you've got small class sizes and you can make more of a personal impact on each student, I suppose. So you might have more of that connection, which is got to be a nice position to be in most of the time.
Absolutely. And I mean, there are benefits to being in a larger group in Exeter, closer to London, closer to big companies. But you're right. The smaller cohorts and the personal approach here in Penryn is actually very different, and our student satisfaction scores are reflect that actually.
And so you clearly have a huge interest in the environment. It makes sense with the role that you're in. Where did that awareness of the environment first come in? Did you say you have a degree in biology?
Yeah, I have undergraduate, masters, and PhDs in biology.
Okay.
So that it was always there, and that they were very specific. My PhD was a lab-based PhD project in protistology, the study of single-celled eukaryotes. But if you ask where it actually started, I mean, I have to think back to school. Even in school, I did my final IB project in biology. I had flatworms growing in the basement of the house and running day and night circadian rhythm experiments on them in our basement. But I have to say it goes even further back than that. I had when I was probably 8 or 9, I had a teacher that I still remember to this day. This would have been in the late 80s, giving my age away. And she made us draw a line down the center of our A4 pages. I think we were doing maths at the time. And we had to draw a line down each one to make more out of the paper so we wouldn't waste it, because paper came from trees and so on. And if you think about it contextually, that this was late 80s, early 90s, these were very early times to be teaching that sort of thing in school. And it actually stuck with me 30 plus years later that that my old teacher, Mrs. Campbell, if you're out there, she made us do that, and many other things actually, like recycling, speaking about the situation in the world and the environment. Those were very, very early days for it, and we didn't quite connect how important that was. We just thought it was a bit of an annoyance that we had to get a ruler out every time we had a new page. But that's where it all started and went from there.
Well, it's quite the journey from there. I mean, I remember doing, I used to draw a line or fold my page in half.
Yes,
to
yes,
write
we folded in order to draw.
Yeah, makes sense. I wonder if they still do that. Interesting. Hopefully they still do, but we'll see.
Do they use paper?
I don't know. Can you fold an iPad in half? I'm not sure. Or you can
soon enough.
Now again, they've come back, haven't they?
Yes,
anyway,
absolutely.
We're going to get nostalgic soon, aren't we? Now, so you've come from that, and you've continued that journey, and you're now a chartered environmentalist, which clearly we're extremely ecstatic to hear about. What does being a chartered environmentalist mean to you?
I think for me, the qualification, the certification is about demonstrating that you have the baseline knowledge and experience, but that you're also willing and able to be a practitioner. I think that's the word practitioner is really important here. And so someone who actually does sustainability, quote unquote. And I think it is becoming increasingly important, as we're learning, by the way, from our executive education programs, that we demonstrate that we have been through a type of training, or that we've jumped through a type of hoop in the space of sustainability and the environment. And so having the chartership has really, going through that journey, really helped me understand, what the basic fundamental knowledge base is, but also in terms of the ethics and the ethical practice and professional practice that goes into having that stamp of approval. And it's something that I speak to my students about regularly, actually, when they ask what more can we do to become practitioners in environment and sustainability. And as I mentioned, we have several students that go into that kind of role in larger or smaller companies. And I would say absolutely that kind of certification gives you a step up over others who don't have it.
So there's a demand out there. There's huge amounts of avenues of sectors and work you can go down. And that's part of the reason I like working at Society of the Environment, to be honest, is because of the spread of different people and different roles that they have across being a chartered environmentalist or a registered environmental practitioner or a technician. They work in so many different areas. So
absolutely,
it's good to hear. Now, a broad question for you. I've had a few broad questions, but what's next for you? Next year of university?
Yeah, next year of university, of course. And I think broadening the portfolios in which I work. I mean, that sounds very unacademic, but basically, the Future 17 educational program sits in a larger space that we call global classrooms. This is anything around teaching and learning digitally, remotely, across borders, and developing these programs that weren't possible 5 years ago. In fact, before COVID, they would never have been possible because we wouldn't have collectively known how to use the tools well enough. So that's one space that I would love to get involved with, grow, and be part of more programs. And then the other is around the professional executive education space, where we are growing our capability as a university, but I would like to get involved and lead more programs, bespoke or otherwise, again, making that difference, as you mentioned earlier, making that impact by engaging with day-to-day practitioners that have clients that can make an impact themselves. So that's a space I really want to work in too. And then finally, of course, the teaching of our students here at the university. So making sure that our programs are up to date and appealing to what is a very rapidly changing student base, and they want new and different educational offerings all the time, and it's actually quite hard to keep up with that. But that's the challenge, and it's also very satisfying when we do.
But you don't need everything to be new, because we still want people to fold over the paper to make sure that they.
So the first thing we teach our business school students is make sure you fold the paper.
Well, why wouldn't you? Yeah, excellent.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, it certainly sounds like you're basically looking to reach more people, make more of a difference by educating people in different ways, the methods that will help them to make more of a difference themselves. So that sounds fantastic. We'll definitely support that one. Final question, which we ask every one of our EnvCast guests, is: if you're able to influence world leaders for a day, what would you be focusing on?
I think coming out of my background in the environmental sciences and biology, I think making sure that scientists and the scientific evidence has a place in the decision-making process, in the policy development process. I think that, as we know, a lot of decisions that are made are political, not necessarily made on the basis of what the scientific evidence suggests. And so having politicians that are more clued in to the science, with a science background or with great scientists around them, for me is really important. And so my advice would be for them to do so. And really, I don't mind when politicians don't have a science background. I think that's great. But being able to listen to what the evidence suggests and make decisions that way, I think is really important. That would be my advice on that front.
Well, that's something we're very keen on at the Society of the Environment. We're quite keen on the idea of influencing the influencer. And many politicians are the influencer. So how do we influence them with the right amount of science and expertise? So it's good to hear. Now, that leads us to the end of our EnvCast for today. So thank you very much for joining us, Ed.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
It's been nice to have you. Now, if you wanted to follow in Ed's footsteps by becoming a chartered environmentalist and showcase your environmental knowledge, then please check out the IEMA website in Ed's case, which is IEMA.net. That's IEMA.net. And we'll put a link to the Chartered Environmentalist page within the description of this episode. So just give that a click or a tap. And next month, we hit climate finance with another chartered environmentalist doing some very, very good work indeed. So please do subscribe to our podcast and don't miss it. We'll see you then. Thank you for listening to today's EnvCast episode. If you'd like to hear more about the Chartered Environmentalist, Registered Environmental Practitioner, or Registered Environmental Technician registrations, please look at our resources available at socenv.org.uk. Alternatively, visit our YouTube channel where you can find a variety of environmental webinar series, registration guides, and various insights from registrants themselves. Just search for Society for the Environment on YouTube. To keep up to date with what's going on at the Society for the Environment, you can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram via @socenv_HQ and via LinkedIn by searching for Society for the Environment with SocEnv in the brackets. We will release a new EnvCast episode on the first Wednesday of each month. So if you're interested in future podcasts, please do subscribe. You can subscribe and review through a variety of platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Castbox.